Welcome, everybody. At Terentia, we believe in providing opportunities for not just our community, but the entire dam and museum community to learn more about topics impacting them, including preservation, AI, and how to bring your collection and dam locked traditionally in the basement to the forefront where they belong. As part of this ongoing community work, we decided to give our session to the fine people at CLIR to talk about their grants to help you digitize hidden collections and recordings at risk. We are honored to welcome Sharon and Alyson to talk to you about how your organization might be eligible for some of their grants. Over to you, Sharon.
Thank you, Neil. Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Burney, and I'm joined here today with my colleague, Alyson Pope. We are program officers for the Council on Library and Information Resources. Our work here is relatively handled by a small staff of about 20 geographically distributed individuals with the greatest concentration living in the DC area. The grants team is made up of myself, Alyson Pope, Program Officer, Jane Larson, Program Associate, Lizzie Albert, Deputy Operations Officer, and managed by Louisa Quadra, who is our Managing Director. Together, we administer our 2 active regranting programs from application to final report. Although we're talking about funding opportunities today, it's important to note that CLIR is not actually a funding agency. For the Recordings at Risk and Digitizing Hidden Collections programs, we receive generous funding from the Mellon Foundation, and CLIR acts as the regranting agency. Just as we receive proposals and reports from institutions, we also send proposals and reports to Mellon and other funding organizations. The first regranting program we would like to highlight is our Recordings at Risk program. CLIR came to recognize that there are unique challenges facing those performing audio and audiovisual digitization and description. The first and biggest of these is that much AV content is at high risk of being lost due to physical degradation and changing environmental conditions. As materials disappear, cultural history does too. A second major challenge is that specialized training is often necessary to address description, storage, and maintenance needs for these materials, which staff may or may not possess. Third, storage costs post-digitization can be prohibitive. So organizations may not have the existing digital infrastructure to store and maintain preservation copies, production copies, and access copies of the materials. The final challenge that CLIR recognized was the often tricky intellectual property situations surrounding AV content. All of the projects that have been funded through Recordings at Risk have had to work through some, if not all, of these challenges. Through the program, CLIR aims to help organizations identify priorities for digital reformatting, build relationships with partners, raise awareness of best practices, and develop practical strategies for addressing all of them. To date, CLIR has completed 11 award cycles for Recordings at Risk, funding a total of 190 projects involving more than 168 unique institutions and awarding over $5.8 million. Recordings at Risk projects are 1 year, and the awards range from $10,000 to $50,000. In the light of many challenges unique to AV collections, the Recordings at Risk program was developed with 4 major primary assessment criteria: impact, urgency, potential for preservation, and approach to access. These are different from our sibling regranting program, Digitizing Hidden Collections, as the emphasis for Recordings at Risk is grounded in the need for preservation through digitization and the recognition that materials will have varying levels of appropriate access given legal and ethical concerns. Recordings at Risk awards are smaller with shorter timelines and have a very narrow focus on the activities directly related to digitization work. Let's discuss eligibility. To be considered for funding, you must be a U.S. nonprofit, academic, research, or cultural memory organization. The organization and its collections must also be located within the United States or a related entity, such as Puerto Rico or American Samoa. Government units and their agencies are eligible so long as their primary function is cultural heritage, and federally recognized tribal governments are also eligible. If you have any questions about whether or not your organization is eligible for a grant, you can always contact us via our program email at recordingsatrisk@clir.org. Recordings at Risk does not have an official list of allowed or disallowed formats. We welcome applications as long as the format is audio and/or visual, is time-based in nature, so no still photographs or slides, and you can find a qualified external service provider or vendor that can perform digital reformatting in an appropriate way for the format and condition of the physical materials. It is important to note that the program was designed with analog to digital reformatting projects in mind. So while born AM digital AV content is no less important and surely at risk, it's not the focus of this particular program at this moment. There are, of course, a few formats that blur the lines when it comes to the analog-digital distinction, such as digital audio tapes. This particular format, for instance, is eligible and certainly at risk. Files on a hard drive, however, in need of digital reformatting are not eligible. Don't hesitate to reach out to us to double check the eligibility of a specific format. So we currently have a call for proposals open for the 12 cycles of recordings at risk. Proposals are due by April 14th, 2025. Recipients will be announced in early August 2025, and we always notify the applicants individually before the public announcement is made. All projects must last between 3 and 12 months. For Cycle 12, all project work should take place between September 1st, 2025 and August 31st, 2026. Our Recordings at Risk applicant webinar will take place on February the 12th, 2025 at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The webinar will require registration, and you can find that link in the chat. This is our final planned cycle of Recordings at Risk at this time. An independent team is conducting an assessment of the program, and we are actively discussing its future with the Mellon Foundation. However, we cannot yet confirm if or when the next funding cycle will take place or whether the program structure will remain the same. We always encourage you to sign up for our grants and programs newsletter for upcoming cycle announcements. Alyson?
Our second regranting program is Digitizing Hidden Collections, Amplifying Unheard Voices, which launched in 2021. The current cycle for Cohort 3 initial applications closed on October 30th, 2024. And we are currently in conversations with the Mellon Foundation regarding future calls for Digitizing Hidden Collections and anticipate a new funding announcement in the near future. We again encourage you to sign up for our grants and programs newsletter for upcoming announcements regarding new funding cycles and calls for proposal. The thematic focus of Amplifying Unheard Voices aims to fund projects that propose to digitize materials that deepen public understanding of the histories of people of color and other communities and populations whose work, experiences, and perspectives have been insufficiently recognized or unattended in digital collections. These often hidden histories include, but are not limited to, those of Black, Indigenous, Latina, and other people of color, women, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, non-binary, and other genderqueer people and communities, immigrants, displaced populations, blind, deaf, and disabled people and communities, and colonized, disenfranchised, enslaved, and incarcerated people. The DHC AUV program awards range from $50,000 to $300,000 US and are 1 to 3 year projects. The program coheres around 5 core values. The first is public knowledge. The program fuels the creation and dissemination of digitized special collections and archives as a public good. The second is broad representation. The program supports digitization projects that will thoughtfully capture and share the untapped stories of people, communities, and populations who are underrepresented in digital collections in ways that contribute to a more complete understanding of human history. The third core value is authentic partnerships. The program prioritizes projects that foreground meaningful engagement with the underserved communities whose stories the source materials tell, and that build inclusive teams across institutional and geographic boundaries. The fourth core value is sustainable infrastructures. The program promotes forward-thinking strategies ensuring the long-term availability, discoverability, and interconnectedness of digitized content. And lastly, community-centered access. The program advocates for approaches to access, description, and outreach that make digitized content as widely available and useful as possible within legal and ethical constraints, centering digital inclusion and respect for materials' local contexts. As mentioned previously, the current cycle of DHC AUV Cohort 3 was moving into the final application phase. All organizations that are accepted to the final application phase will be notified in mid-February 2025. We provide a greater level of support to those organizations invited to the final round to help develop initial applications into competitive final applications. This involves a number of individuals from CLIR's community, including members of our review panel, assisting in an applicant support webinar series. The series provides applicants with different aspects of the final proposal: budget, digitization and preservation plans, collections assessment, rights ethics, and reuse, with presentations and question and answer time for professionals with expertise in these subject areas. The final application is due May 5th, 2025 for Cohort 3, and we anticipate making the public announcement of funded projects in October 2025. Any future funded cycle is tentatively scheduled to run on a similar timeline, with an initial call for proposals opening in the latter half of the summer of 2025. We'd like to thank you all for having CLIR here today. You can always reach the grants team at hiddencollections@clir.org. I will drop that in the chat. Or recordings@risk@clir.org. To keep informed of new funding opportunities, program announcements, and CLIR in general, you can sign up for our Grants and Programs newsletter, and we'll drop that in the chat as well. That's where we announce all new funding opportunities, as well as new calls for proposal. And we also have a CLIR plus DLF job board that member organizations can view and post to. So I'll drop a link to the job board as well. And I do think we have a few moments if anyone wants to ask a couple of questions before the session is over. We went a little more quickly than we had anticipated.
Listen, I got all those links in there for you. Yeah, any Q&A? Let's stop my sharing.
And I know that will be available at some of the lounge tables virtually after the session if anyone wants to ask direct but project-specific questions.
Okay, we have a question. Alyson, would a small tribal museum and cultural preservation organization be eligible? Yes, they would.
And I do want to make a distinction between the two programs because I know there are a mix of attendees here. Recordings at Risk is open to U.S. nonprofits, and Hidden Collections is open to U.S. and Canadian nonprofits. So in either case, the organization type would be eligible, but I just wanted you all to have a sense of what the eligibility is based on location.
We have another question.
Have we worked with Christian organizations in the past? Are there examples posted? We have done some funded projects. Moravian comes to mind. Pitt's Theology Library has also gotten a Recordings at Risk.
We've had churches and monasteries. We have a wonderful page for both of our grant programs, Recordings at Risk and Hidden Collections. And on that, you'll see a link for the funded projects page. And it'll tell you all of the projects that have been funded for all the cycles of both programs.
So that is the Hidden Collections link for funded projects. And here is the Recordings at Risk link for funded projects. So you can check the history of the program. But yeah, we do have some previous experience working with various religious organizations.
We have another one. Any specific community grants? We've had a lot of community organizations apply for grants, and yes, they've done very well. One of a fascinating one that was done was by the Puerto Rican Cultural Center in Chicago, and they did a digitization grant and included a lot of community outreach, and we were able to do a site visit last year, and it was wonderful to see how that organization has grown and how they implement partnerships in a very unique way, in which they were able to also use their ability to digitize to assist other smaller Puerto Rican cultural centers with their digitization projects in a learning capacity.
There's a question, will the changes in the federal funding landscape significantly affect the availability of these grants? I think there's a degree of uncertainty, right? That's just like permeating in general, but these are regrant programs funded through the Mellon Foundation, so they do have a non-federal funder. We do not support either of these regranting programs with federal grant monies, so we don't, in the immediate sense, see that being something that changes, although we may have larger pools of applicants applying as the external pools of grant funds available from the federal government via institutes like the IMLS may decrease or be paused.
There's another question about fiscally sponsored organizations eligible. This is a great question. We do have some fiscal sponsored organizations. We do have, this is where this gets tricky. One of our requirements is that the materials that are nominated for digitization must be owned and held by the applicant organization. Recordings at Risk does not allow for collaborative projects. However, Hidden Collection does allow for collaborative projects. So we see this happen a lot of times in this realm. And yeah, so we do allow for fiscally sponsored, but you must also own and hold those collections. Any more questions?
Well, if that's all the questions that we have to say today, Sharon and Alyson, I wanted to thank you for your time. For those who are interested, the next session about small museums is one of the museums there is the Beck Cultural Exchange Center, and they were one of the recipients of your grants, and we're proud to be working with them as well for it. So definitely check out that session if you want to hear a little bit more about what they're doing on their digitization program. Sharon and Alyson, thank you so much for joining us today. I really
Thank
do
you.
appreciate it. And we hope that we got the word out for everybody to apply. I'm sure Sharon and Alyson can't wait to hear more. As mentioned, they're also going to be available in the lounge should you be interested. For those who are interested in that, they'll be there and you have their contact information. We encourage you to reach out to both Sharon and Alyson. And it was a real pleasure having you all today. Thank you so much.